It doesn't begin with miracles, it begins with silence. The kind of silence that tells you something terrible is already in motion, and no one knows how to stop it. Season 6, Episode 1 of The Chosen opens with a truth that hurts to accept. The story everyone loves is no longer moving toward hope, but toward cost. This is the moment where faith stops feeling safe, and belief starts demanding everything. Episode 1 of Season 6 feels different from the very first breath. There is no sense of celebration, no feeling of victory ahead. Instead, there is a quiet heaviness, like the air before a storm that everyone knows is coming, but no one can name out loud. Jesus walks among his followers, but something has shifted. His presence is still calm, still gentle, yet it carries a finality that wasn't there before. He is no longer teaching as if time is endless. Every word feels chosen carefully, as if he knows there are only so many left to give. The disciples sense it too, even if they don't fully understand it. Their conversations feel shorter. Their confidence feels thinner. These are the same people who once followed him without hesitation, who trusted that every road would end in a miracle. Now, belief feels heavier. Faith still exists, but it is no longer protected by certainty. There is an unspoken fear moving through them, not loud or dramatic, but deeply human. The kind of fear that makes people avoid eye contact, that turns questions into silence. Jesus, in this episode, is not portrayed as a man preparing to escape suffering. He is portrayed as someone who has already accepted it. His strength is not loud, it is steady, and that steadiness makes everything else feel fragile. He knows what is coming, and that knowledge creates distance, even between him and those who love him most. Not because he wants distance, but because this is a road he must walk alone. And the pain of that truth sits quietly in every moment. There is no villain stepping forward with a clear threat. Instead, danger exists in decisions being made quietly, in authority spoken calmly, in power exercised without anger. This makes the episode deeply unsettling. Evil does not announce itself. It organizes, it plans, it waits. And while the disciples struggle with their fear, forces beyond them are already moving pieces into place. What makes Episode 1 heartbreaking is not loss itself, but the waiting for it. The feeling that something sacred is being slowly taken apart, moment by moment, and no one is allowed to stop it. Faith is no longer about seeing and believing. It is about standing firm when everything familiar begins to fall away. Season 6, Episode 1 makes one thing painfully clear. The hardest part of belief is not following Jesus into miracles, but staying with him when the path leads straight into suffering. As Episode 1 continues, the tension doesn't rise through action, but through restraint. Nothing explodes. Nothing resolves. Instead, the pressure tightens slowly, like hands closing around something fragile. Faith in this episode is not attacked directly. It is tested through waiting, through confusion, through the unbearable feeling of not knowing how to protect what you love. The disciples are still together, but unity no longer feels like strength. It feels like people clinging to one another because standing alone feels impossible. Jesus speaks less now, but when he does, his words feel heavier than before. There is no urgency in his voice, no attempt to convince or reassure. He speaks as someone who understands that belief cannot be forced, especially when fear has entered the room. His teachings no longer sound like invitations. They sound like preparation, not preparation for victory, but preparation for endurance. He is not explaining what will happen in clear terms, yet everything he says points toward loss. And that unspoken truth is what hurts the most. The disciples respond in different ways, and this is where the episode becomes deeply human. Some try to hold on to routine, as if normal behavior might restore the sense of safety they once felt. Others become restless, searching for answers that aren't being given. Questions linger in the air, unfinished and uncomfortable. Why does it feel like everything is slowing down? Why does it feel like danger is closer, even when nothing has happened yet? These questions remain unanswered, and the lack of clarity becomes its own form of suffering. Peter, once so bold and unshakable, feels conflicted. His faith hasn't disappeared, but it no longer feels unbreakable. Confidence is replaced by responsibility, and that weight is new to him. He wants to protect Jesus, but he doesn't know from what or how. That helplessness eats at him. Others feel similar emotions, though they don't always express them out loud. Silence becomes common not because there is nothing to say, but because saying it would make the fear real. What stands out most in this section is how belief is portrayed as something fragile, not weak, but vulnerable. Faith here is not heroic. It trembles, it hesitates, it struggles to stand upright when certainty is removed, and yet it doesn't collapse. That struggle becomes the point. The episode suggests that faith doesn't lose value when it shakes. Instead, it becomes honest. It becomes real. Outside this circle of followers, power continues to move quietly. Decisions are being made without anger, without cruelty on the surface. Everything appears controlled, lawful, and reasonable. That calmness is unsettling because it leaves no clear enemy to fight. There is no dramatic confrontation, no moment where someone can step in and stop what's coming. Injustice here wears a calm face, and that makes resistance feel almost impossible. By the end of this section of the episode, the audience understands something deeply uncomfortable. There will be no last-minute rescue from fear, no sudden sign that makes everything clear again. Season 6, Episode 1 is asking the audience to sit with uncertainty just like the disciples are, to feel what it means to believe without reassurance, to stay present when the deal no longer feels safe, when following Jesus no longer promises protection, only truth. And that is where the heartbreak truly begins. Not in loss itself, but in the slow realization that faith may demand more than anyone feels ready to give. As Episode 1 moves forward, the emotional center shifts toward isolation. Not physical isolation, but something far more painful. Jesus is still surrounded by people, still listened to, still followed, yet there is a growing distance that no one knows how to cross. This is the loneliness of knowing what must be done when no one else can fully understand it. His calm now feels heavier, not because he is uncertain, but because he is certain. And certainty, in this moment, becomes a burden. There is a quiet realization forming among the disciples that Jesus is carrying something he will not share with them, not because he doesn't trust them, but because this weight is his alone to bear. That realization creates discomfort. Love wants closeness, but purpose creates distance. They sense that the road ahead is narrowing, and that not everyone will be able to walk it all the way. This is not spoken out loud, but it shapes every interaction. Every look feels longer. Every pause feels loaded with meaning. Faith in this section becomes deeply personal. The disciples are no longer operating as a single emotional unit. Each one is facing their belief individually. Some feel anger creeping in, not at Jesus, but at the situation. Others feel guilt for their fear, as if being afraid means they are failing. A few try to suppress their emotions entirely, hoping discipline will replace courage. None of these reactions are judged by the episode. They are simply shown as human responses to an unbearable truth. Jesus, meanwhile, does not try to remove their fear. That choice is striking. In earlier moments, fear was often followed by reassurance, by signs, by clarity. Here, fear is allowed to exist. He acknowledges pain without fixing it. He recognizes confusion without explaining it away. This creates one of the most emotionally difficult aspects of the episode. The audience wants comfort. The disciples want comfort. But comfort would soften the truth, and Season 6 refuses to do that. There is a growing sense that every moment matters now, not because something dramatic is happening, but because time feels limited. Conversations feel final even when they are ordinary. A simple exchange carries the weight of something that may not be repeated. This awareness changes how everyone behaves. Love becomes more careful, words become more intentional, and silence becomes more frequent, because silence feels safer than saying the wrong thing. The episode also deepens its examination of power and responsibility. Authority is not shown as cruel or violent. It is shown as distant, organized, and calm. Decisions are made in quiet spaces, far removed from the people they will affect most. This separation between decision makers and consequences creates a feeling of helplessness. There is no clear moment to intervene, no dramatic turning point to cling to. Everything is unfolding exactly as planned, and that planning feels unstoppable. One of the most painful elements of this section is the realization that love does not always mean understanding. The disciples love Jesus deeply, but love cannot follow him where he is going. That gap creates grief before loss even happens. It is grief for what is coming, grief for what cannot be changed, grief for the moment when belief will be tested beyond emotion and into action. By the end of this section, the episode makes something very clear. Faith is no longer about choosing to follow. That choice has already been made. Now faith is about choosing to stay, even when staying means watching something you love move towards suffering. This is not heroic faith. It is quiet, painful, uncertain faith. The kind that doesn't feel strong but remains present anyway. Season 6, Episode 1 uses this loneliness to confront the audience directly. It asks whether belief is still possible when understanding fails, whether love can remain when protection is gone, whether faith can survive when it offers no escape, only endurance. And as this section closes, the weight of that question settles in, unanswered, heavy, and impossible to ignore. In this part of Episode 1, hope itself begins to change shape. It no longer feels like light at the end of a path. It feels like something fragile being carried through darkness. The episode makes it clear that hope does not disappear, but it becomes expensive. It demands patience, surrender, and the willingness to move forward without reward. This shift is quiet, but it is one of the most devastating changes of the season so far. The disciples are no longer asking what they will gain by following Jesus. That question has already faded. Now they are facing a harder one. What will it cost them to keep going? Faith here is no longer strengthened by miracles or visible success. It is strengthened slowly and painfully by endurance. By choosing to remain when leaving would be easier. This is where belief stops feeling inspiring and starts feeling heavy. Jesus, in this section, feels profoundly alone in a way that goes beyond physical separation. Even in moments where he is surrounded by people who love him, there is an emotional distance that cannot be crossed. He knows what lies ahead, and that knowledge isolates him. Not because he is withdrawing, but because no one else can fully carry that awareness. His humanity is emphasized deeply here. He is not shown as fearless, he is shown as aware. And that awareness makes every step more difficult. There is a subtle grief woven throughout this part of the episode. It is not grief for something that has already been lost, but grief for what is about to be taken. This anticipation of loss weighs on every interaction. Smiles feel restrained. Laughter feels rare. Even moments of connection carry sadness because everyone senses that time is running out. The episode allows this sadness to exist without rushing past it, forcing the audience to feel it fully. Power continues to operate quietly in the background. No raised voices, no dramatic threats, just systems moving forward as they always have. Responsibility is passed from one place to another, cleanly and efficiently. This version of injustice is terrifying because it feels normal. It doesn't look like hatred, it looks like order. And that makes it harder to resist, harder to name, harder to fight. The pacing remains slow and intentional. Silence is used as a tool, not an absence. Silence after difficult truths, silence when someone wants to speak but doesn't know how. Silence when intervention is expected but does not come. This silence forces reflection. It leaves no space for distraction. It demands presence. And in that presence, discomfort grows. What makes this section especially powerful is its refusal to offer relief. There is no emotional release, no moment where fear is replaced by clarity. Instead, the episode insists on honesty. This is what it looks like when faith is no longer rewarded with safety. This is what it means to follow when the path leads directly into suffering. Hope does not vanish, but it is no longer comforting. It becomes an act of will. By the end of this section, the audience understands that Season 6 is not interested in making belief easy to watch. It is interested in making it real. It asks whether hope still has meaning when it comes without protection, without guarantees, without immediate answers. And it leaves that question hanging, heavy and unresolved, inviting the audience to sit with it rather than escape it. Episode 1 does not rush toward tragedy. It walks toward it slowly, deliberately, with open eyes. And that slow walk filled with costly hope and unspoken grief, becomes one of the most heartbreaking elements of the story so far. As episode 1 reaches its final movement, everything narrows. Not into action, but into inevitability. The episode makes it painfully clear that this story is no longer about avoiding what's coming. It's about facing it without illusions. The deal that can't lose is not a bargain made for safety or success. It is a commitment to truth, no matter the cost. And that commitment begins to define every character in this closing stretch. Jesus stands at the center of this truth, fully aware and fully present. There is no attempt to change the outcome, no visible struggle to escape it. Instead, there is acceptance. Not passive acceptance, but chosen acceptance. He understands that what is coming will break hearts, scatter followers, and leave silence where certainty once lived. Yet he continues forward. Not because it is easy, but because it is necessary. This is where his strength becomes unmistakable. Not in power, but in willingness. The disciples feel the weight of this choice, even if they don't fully grasp its shape. Something is ending, and something far more painful is beginning. Their faith is no longer supported by momentum or shared excitement. Each one must now decide what belief looks like when it no longer promises protection. Staying becomes harder than leaving. Loyalty becomes heavier than doubt, and yet many remain, not because they are brave, but because walking away would cost them something too deep to name. Fear is no longer hidden in this section. It exists openly, quietly, in the spaces between words. There are no dramatic confessions, no emotional speeches, just the slow unraveling of certainty. Faith doesn't collapse, but it bends under pressure. And the episode treats this bending with respect. Doubt is not framed as betrayal. Fear is not framed as weakness. They are shown as natural responses to love facing loss. The systems of power continue their silent work. Decisions move forward without urgency, without cruelty, without hesitation. This calm efficiency makes resistance feel pointless. There is no single moment to intervene, no clear injustice to stop in its tracks. Everything is unfolding exactly as designed, and that design feels impossible to escape. The episode makes a chilling statement here. Sometimes the most devastating harm comes not from chaos, but from order. As the episode closes, silence once again takes control. Not empty silence, but heavy silence. The kind that follows understanding. The kind that settles when there is nothing left to argue, nothing left to negotiate. Only the choice to endure. The story does not offer closure. It does not provide comfort. It does not prepare the audience for what's next in an easy way. Instead, it asks for something far more demanding: patience. Season 6, Episode 1 ends without resolution, and that is its greatest strength. It refuses to soften the truth or ease the tension. It leaves the audience standing in the same place as the disciples, aware that the road ahead leads through suffering, not around it. Belief here is no longer about inspiration. It is about staying present when everything familiar begins to fall away. The deal that can't lose is not about winning. It is about faithfulness, about choosing truth over safety, about endurance over escape. And as the episode fades, one thing becomes undeniable. This season is not asking viewers to watch. It is asking them to witness, to remain, to endure. And once that choice is made, there is no turning back.